Y'all read F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby back in school, right? At some point you got exposed to that. Maybe you saw the Leonardo DiCaprio version. Who directed that? Was that Baz Luhrmann? It felt like a Baz Luhrmann film. I don't know if it was or not. It was all right. It was interesting. But one of the things I remember about going through that book was that my, must have been 9th grade English teacher at Highland High School in Alt, Colorado, told me that what I needed to be doing was writing down the repeated themes. Like this Fitzgerald character, he uses repetition a lot to make a point. And some of the key themes and key payoffs are detectable and much more satisfying if you keep an eye out for those points of repetition. And so as we're going through it, we find that this theme of filth, industrial filth, ashes is how it's usually expressed, keeps coming up throughout the book. And the idea is that this industrial wasteland, just this ick moment in society, is what you're seeing in most places. But then you've got this upper crust, fancy, put lipstick on it lifestyle that is being created by the Great Gatsby. And the contrast to this is his constant use of this term old sport. He says it all the time, and it's like a way to distract from the reality of what things are. It's something that he wants to make things feel chummy and good, and like all of this is sustainable, and like all of this is going to work, and like it's going to be all right. But there's this moral floundering going on just below the surface. And every time you see one of those terms, ashes or the expression old sport, pop to the surface in that great novel, and it is a great novel for a reason, you're getting a sense that it's there for a purpose and that it's all pointing you toward some thematic realization that is supposed to occur to you as the reader as you go along. Likewise, in the book of Matthew, there's an expression that subtly keeps coming up and that looks like it is demanding a payoff. And I would argue that in the parable we're looking at right now in Matthew chapter 21, we are seeing the beginnings of, or maybe the majority of, what that payoff is going to look like. And as the repetition of ashes and old sport, I'm making little quote marks, are to the Great Gatsby, so the expression good fruit, making quote marks again, is crucial to understanding the book of Matthew, a book written to a Jewish audience who would have heard great things about John the Baptist, great things about Jesus, who would have been compelled by what both of these guys did, particularly the miraculous stuff and the teaching and the authority of Jesus, and who were also aware of the hollowness and unsatisfactoriness of the status quo that they got from their religious leadership. They're reading this book of Matthew trying to figure out what to make of the whole thing. And Matthew has sprinkled some literary breadcrumbs along the trail as we go along that need to be paid off, but where does the payoff happen? Well, rewind like a year and a half of us talking about this stuff. No, more than that, like 2 years of us talking about this stuff almost. And you get back to Matthew chapter 3, where John the Baptist sees all of the religious leaders coming out to meet him in the wilds. And do you remember? He says this sharp-tongued thing at the religious leadership as it comes to check out who he is, Matthew 3:7. But when he, John the Baptist, saw many of the Pharisees and Sadducees coming to where he was baptizing, he said to them, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the coming wrath? Produce fruit in keeping with repentance." Aha! Fruit, like the production of an effective tree, like, say, a fig tree, or the production of, like, an effective vineyard, like say, a grape. Produce fruit in keeping with repentance, and do not think you can say to yourselves, "Oh, we have Abraham as our father." I tell you that out of these stones God can raise up children for Abraham. But the axe is already at the root of the tree, and every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. Now just keep Matthew chapter 21 and the parable we looked at yesterday, the parable of the moral outrage about the guy who owns the vineyard and sends his servants to collect his part of the harvest for being the owner of the vineyard. And then they kill the servants and he sends more and then they kill them. Then he's like, well, they'll listen to my son. And then he sends his son and then they kill them. Keep that in the back of your head as we cruise through a few more of these. Okay, chapter 7, we're over into the Sermon on the Mount now. And here, that theme of fruit and good tree, bad tree comes up again. Watch out for the false prophets. This is all Jesus talking. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that doesn't bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you'll recognize them. 2 repetitions is not quite a theme yet, but if we see a third repetition of this motif, then we're getting into something. Well, surprise, we're going to. Flip over to chapter 12, verse 33. Make a tree good, and its fruit will be good. Or make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad, for a tree is recognized by its fruit. You brood of vipers. Now, this isn't John the Baptist. This just sounds like John the Baptist. This is Jesus of Nazareth. How can you who are evil say anything good? For out of the overflow of the heart the mouth speaks. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. But I tell you that men will have to give an account on the day of judgment for every careless word they've spoken, for by your words you'll be acquitted, or by your words you'll be condemned. Now we got something cooking here. You hear Gatsby drop the old sport thing for the 3rd, 4th, 5th time, and you're like, there's a reason. I'm supposed to notice something. Likewise, there is a reason here, and on the very next page, so listen, you're not hearing any pages turning. Listen, no pages turning. You get this at the end of the first parable of the Kingdom Parables Discourse, is the one about the sower. It says, still other seed fell on good soil where it produced a crop 160 or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. And at this point, we're seeing so much of this that we better hope that we have ears, because if we're missing it, apparently we're not only letting down our 9th grade English teacher, but we're letting down God. Fast forward back to chapter 21, where we were a couple of days ago, and surely at this point you saw this one coming. I mean, all this language about you can't have a good thing here that comes out of a bad thing there, and if it's good and it's a fig tree, it should produce figs. And then we get to this story of a tree that isn't producing figs, and Jesus curses it and says, may you never bear fruit again, in verse 19, and immediately the tree withers. It takes you all the way back to all of those earlier remarks. It particularly takes you back to the remark of John the Baptist, like, the axe is at the base of the tree. We're getting ready to swing. Don't put your confidence in your ancestry. There is a new family of faith. There is something truer and realer. Don't think the family thing's that big a deal. Remember, God could make a family out of some guy from modern day Iraq or Kuwait. He can make a new family of faith if he wants to. Don't think that's what it's about. It's about the character of God, and it's about your right posture before that king. And there will be judgment, according to John the Baptist, not me, I'm not in charge. According to John the Baptist, there will be judgment for the tree that is not producing. And then we move forward just a tiny bit in chapter 21 to the parable of the morally outrageous event at the vineyard. And what do we have? The same thing. It's the vineyard language. Once again, this harkens back to all the stuff we've already seen in Matthew. It harkens back to the atrocity that led to the atrocity that led to what went down with Hosea, who we talked about a little while back. The thing in 1 Kings with Naboth's vineyard, where Jezebel was like, oh, you want a vineyard real bad, King Ahab, and you can't get it? Don't worry. We'll just have the guy who owns it murdered by stoning after we get him on trumped up, completely false charges. And then Ahab and Jezebel's entire family gets judged because of what they've done wrong, and it creates this spiral of ick. That's vineyard language as well. Jesus uses vineyard, vine, branches language in the other Gospels also. It comes up famously in Isaiah 27, where it says, sing about a fruitful vineyard. I, the Lord, watch over it. I water it continually. I guard it day and night so that no one may harm it. I'm not angry. If only there were briars and thorns confronting me, I would march against them in battle. I would set them all on fire. Or else let them come to me for refuge. Let them make peace with me. Yes, let them make peace with me. In the days to come, Jacob will take root. Israel will bud and blossom and fill all the world with fruit. And listen to this. This language is not new. Jesus is not creating a new motif. Matthew is not creating a new motif. They're drawing on imagery that was already present. For God is the caretaker of this vineyard that is representative of his people. And the idea is that they have a responsibility as well to care for this stuff. You can read forward in Isaiah 27 and see that. You can go to Ezekiel 19 and see that. This is not new territory. We're going to break this down more in depth tomorrow, but long story short, when we get to the end of this parable of the moral outrage event at the vineyard, and it concludes with Jesus being like, yeah, you're right, there's a judgment coming. And you guys should have listened when John was saying the stuff about the axe already being at the root of the tree. Many of the people have already listened to the warnings against you as trees, vineyards that produce no fruit and no harvest. You were given a job, you didn't do it, and that job is going to be stripped from you. When he says all this stuff, when he invokes all of that imagery, it's not just some passing thing that to you and me as outsiders is like, oh, wow, that sounds critical or something. It is maximum loaded. Everybody knows what's just been said. And there is a reason after Jesus draws on that imagery that they want to immediately arrest him. Like, this has to be stopped right now, but they can't do it because they're in public and people like him too much. There's a reason they're triggered to that degree, and we're going to break that down more next time around. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10 Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.